Vavi PM, and thanks for staying on. There's been mixed reaction to the News24 on the record summit that is taking place, or at least this weekend, aimed at finding practical solutions to creating 5 million jobs targeted in the next 10 years. For more on what took place at the summit, we're joined now by the General Secretary of SAFTU, Zwelinzima, Vavi. That's Vavi, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. There's mixed reaction to, firstly, the organization of this summit, but also to what has taken place there. What is your reaction?
Well, two main points we're raising, disappointingly. The first point is that the presenters, the panelists, the main addresses were all drawn from one school of thought, were all carefully selected in order to present a single view on what should be the solutions to the number one crisis facing South Africa today, which is the crisis of unemployment. It was deliberately done so that there can be an semblance of a consensus, which doesn't exist. So it was an attempt to ensure that the world is fed only one view, and that anybody watching that conference live would have come to a conclusion that South Africa is united behind one economic program, which we criticize as a program of neoliberalism, of austerity measures, of the withdrawal of the state from the active developmental agenda in the economy, or even actively promoting the agenda of decent work in the economy, what we will normally call a Washington consensus, the programs of the World Bank economic programs were presented as if there are no other alternative views inside South Africa to the status quo. That was our first critique. Someone will say, well, there was a COSATU president there. One labor leader in a sea of speeches that endorses the programs of government cannot be a balanced view. We are disappointed because News24, the editors, the journalists that are there are well respected. They have seen through the entire transition from colonial apartheid to the 30 years of democracy, and they know one of the biggest celebrated strengths of South Africa is that it managed to draw in people from different political, ideological perspectives into a common ground that produced the constitution that we are celebrating yet again this year. We were disappointed about that.
So that, I mean, let's just stick with that point a little bit, and then we'll come to your second one. One could look at the list, would say, yes, I would have mentioned COSATU being there, Zingisolusi being there, but you also got the Auditor General there. You've also got other people who are very critical, for example, of ANC policies. You've got Songezo Zibi there, you've got Sivuyo Kwahube there, you've got Helen Ziller there, who would definitely not be in agreement with ANC policies. So we would say there's a diverse representation there.
Diverse all from the liberal perspective. Diverse, yes, maybe Helen Zille, for example, may present herself as an opposition to the programs of the government. But remember, the DA now calls the speeches of the Minister of Finance as reading from the DA playbook, meaning that ideologically, they are all moving into the same direction. They may quibble about some of the details, such as the black economic empowerment and here and there, but broadly, they are all supporters of the current fiscal and monetary policies outside, I would say, outside the Auditor General, who cannot afford to take views about that. But almost everyone who was presenting there agrees with the fiscal policies of budget cuts, of tax cuts for corporates, and of tax evasions that the state is doing nothing about, and so forth. They will agree on the monetary policies of removing exchange controls and imposing a 3%, now below 2 to 3% inflation targeting, and they will agree on listing of the South African companies to other foreign countries. So broadly, they all agree, and that's the point that we are making.
Yeah.
The organizers of the conference failed the country in that they did not include in the conference people that are known, highly regarded intellectuals who are from the left perspective, who have alternative proposals to present to the president, to the minister, and to the world. And unfortunately, those alternative proposals were not heard throughout the 2 days conference. I think that's why.
Let's talk about the second point. Let's talk about the second point. So, I mean, if for example, we look at, I mean, we can't look at everything that they spoke about, but NPA saying that the skills crisis is costing the economy. Somebody coming up and saying, well, we need to invest heavily to get proper skills into the system. What would you disagree with there?
Absolutely nothing to disagree with that. Every liberal, every left-leaning economist will agree that one of the biggest challenges we're facing in South Africa is that our SETA system, which is collecting over 20 billion rands every year, has not helped South Africa to transform its skills base so that we are ready to engage with the fourth industrial revolution. But that's not an economic framework. That's just a detail that is necessary to build on what will be an economic program, either an economic program based on trickle down, which is what the government is pursuing now. We are limiting our role into fixing an environment for business to prosper, and we hope that from the business activities, the crisis facing humanity will be solved.
Yeah.
And we disagree with that. Our view is that the alternative must be that we build a growing economy, a re-industrializing economy, an economy that dismantles the apartheid colonial structure that is based on extravism and of moving our minerals raw, exporting them to the former colonizing or now China, and then bringing them back into South Africa as finished goods in a manner that destroys local capacity, destroys local jobs. So these are two economic paradigms, and to agree on issue of skills and to improve this quality and quantity of education is not part of what you will call an economic framework. Important that detail as it is, but it is not something that anybody will ever disagree with.
So Tony Ehrenreich, for example, representing COSATU in the Western Cape, saying that if you speak of economic policy, BEE should have a stronger focus on helping smaller businesses and people in the townships.
Absolutely spot on. Tony Ehrenreich is always on the point. But the point that we're making, even about the black economic empowerment, you cannot have black economic empowerment that is worth celebrating when you have a monetary policy and that focuses solely, when you have a Reserve Bank and its monetary policy so focusing solely on reaching the target of 2 to 3% in terms of inflation. Because you will inevitably have the current situation in South Africa where the repo rate and what we get charged by the bank is now hovering about 10%. Yeah. You cannot be encouraging the entry of a former excluded black majority into the economic mainstream when you make money deliberately too expensive for people to borrow, when you're deliberately making money too expensive, even for larger industrial manufacturing firms to borrow money in order to expand their operations and therefore create more jobs in South Africa. So you can't claim to be pursuing a black economic empowerment program when you maintain an ultra-conservative monetary policies that deliberately throttles prospects of growth and economic growth and job creation, and then say no, we are about black economic empowerment. It then goes to the point that we're making. that black economic empowerment have been interpreted narrowly to mean allowing black people to have shares in the private firms, and then only the politically connected people get those shares, and the majority of black people remain the face of unemployment, poverty, and inequality.
Yeah. So are you saying, from my understanding, you're saying firstly you are not happy with the representation, especially of the left-leaning formations that were not properly represented there, but also you seem to feel that there was a coherent understanding from everybody else that was there as to what is the role of the state and what is needed for us to grow. There's nobody who kicked the table and said this austerity route is not the way to go.
Not a single one, not one, because it was deliberately designed to be like that. There was no SAFTU. There was no independent trade unions. There were no abahlali basemjondolo who were facing or representing communities facing evictions, left, right, and center, who are trying to highlight the fact that South Africa has a 3.7 million house backlog, and that every of our cities is now surrounded by informal settlements that are the face of what we call a ring of fire in all of our cities. You talk Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban, and you name them all. There was no one coming from the Equal Education Campaign who will talk about how does the austerity impact on quality and quantity of education. No one was there from the Treatment Action Campaign or even Section 27 to talk about the devastating impact of the collapsing public health care in our country, and what we can do to speed up the processes towards the introduction of the national health insurance. There was no left-leaning environmental groupings that will speak to the devastating impact of the climate change in South Africa. No one was there coming from the mining communities that will speak about the devastation of the illegal activities, as well as the so-called legal activities invading their land and their homes. But the second important point that I should not leave out, Vogamdlul, even on race terms, even on the national geographics, that conference was simply not representative. It was too white. It was not what we know the demographics of the country to be. And it was a shame to be in a conference that is dominated by white faces 31 years into democracy. And I hope that the leadership of News24 are listening to this criticism, and they will never, ever invite us into one-size-fits-all ideological fitting, as well as even bringing us into a conference that is dominated by one race above everybody else. Thank you.
Let's leave it there. Much appreciated. We're out of time. Thank you very much. That's Zwelinzima Vavi there. Right, let's take you over now.